Hello and welcome to the Anatomy of a Leader with me, Maria Hvorostovsky. I'm the founder and CEO of HVO Search, working at the intersection of creativity, retail, and digital. Each month, I discover more about founders, investors, CEOs, chairmen, and women, how they succeeded, how they failed, and what they learned along the way. Thank you so much for coming. Really lovely to see you. I still can't kind of get used to being so far apart and not being able to say hello properly. So all this social distancing is still kind of like throwing me off a little bit.
I'm with you. Some people really love the fact that it's removed the need to kind of give,
I kind of see that.
But I'm very sort of tactile. So I'm kind of, I naturally go in for a sort of a hug or a kiss.
It's so funny because it's like before it was like one kiss or two kisses. Now it's like
no kisses.
No kisses, no hugs. Like how do you actually approach a person? So yes, so thank you so much for joining, and actually congratulations on your new role.
Oh, thank you.
With TrueFit. You're the new managing director for EMEA.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your remit keeps expanding, but I'd love to kind of touch on that later. But we've actually known each other for
a long time.
For a very long time.
Totally. And in fact, it's over 10 years.
Definitely.
It is, it's 14 years.
14 years, yeah. It feels like a million years ago, but also, as I was saying to you earlier, I had this flashback of being in paper club for your first anniversary with my wardrobe, and just had this moment in the bathroom with this very tall, blonde, slim woman cutting her dress shawl, who happens to be Paris Hilton. So it's just like such a surreal moment.
It is. I know, and those are moments that there's so much. It's very, and you'll probably understand this. Sometimes when it's your own business, there's so much that happens that you forget so much, to be honest. Because it's such a fast ride. But there are some crazy moments of just, insanity where you have sort of, you have professional retail, because they're all investors were there, and then you have the PR, fashion and celebrity angle, and you put them in a room and it's just sort of a melting pot.
Yeah, I totally get that, where all of the different parts of you kind of meet, and that's where it all kind of blends.
Yeah,
it's very hard. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I mean, it can be very difficult to kind of separate yourself from the business and everything. So kind of like all entwined.
Oh, I think what's the most interesting thing about the journey that I've realized is that you have got to always be in an open mindset to learn and to sort of course correct, take the lessons, and because it's such an intense ride.
It's so funny you say that, because that's the one thing that I really noticed about you all of those years ago, where you're like a sponge. You're listening, you're picking up everything, you're absorbing everything. And that really stood out to me. And I know when we first met, which is when you were looking for the buying director for my wardrobe at the time, and you were so humble and so kind, but also always ready to listen. And I think that's, to me, that stuck with me all of those years.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was lucky that I did have some great guidance, but I always came from a place of knowing that I didn't have all the answers. So, and I think at times it's easier for a female entrepreneur to accept that than a male entrepreneur, particularly when you get into the ego territory and an alpha territory. And I always took the positive that I wanted to surround myself with experts to learn. And so that was something that was always in me. Even in my 20s, when I had when I was in London and I had various roles, I was, like you say, that human sponge that would be, I was at L'Oreal and Laboratoire Garnier in merchandising and marketing. Again, I just absorbed everything. The same in advertising, the same in internet publishing at the Times. So I've been fascinated to just sort of go into these random sectors at times, take in as much information, and then carry on my journey into the next role. And then I've sort of found myself, particularly with wardrobe, that it kind of all in a really bizarre way. It sort of all was needed.
I think that's the role of the entrepreneur, when you're connecting so many different dots. And I think that's kind of really key.
Yeah.
But I'd like to go to the beginning for you. Like, what was it like growing up for you?
My father was an entrepreneur. So it was a family business. And I was used to work and business being the topic of every dinner table conversation, to the extent that I remember saying, I am never having my own business. It's so selfish. And then, you know, it's sort of that thing that they say, repair or repeat. But it was, but I was very lucky. I had, I was always disruptive. So I went to this amazing school. I was very lucky to go to a great sort of public school. I got asked to leave because I was disruptive. So even from then, I just sort of was much more, I would push the boundaries. I didn't understand this whole thing of, you know, tradition and this is how we do it. Because I just think there are certain traditions, of course, which are lovely. But the pointless traditions, which don't make sense to the new generation, I just didn't understand. So yeah, I got asked to leave, which is a public school way of being expelled. The thing my parents were most annoyed about, not that I got asked to leave, but they then had to still pay the next term's fees, right? Because the school said that they hadn't given them enough notice, and my dad made the point of saying, well, I think you're the one that has given notice. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, it was sort of, I wasn't academic. I was vocational. I loved working. I had so many different jobs because I loved having money. You know, it's just like really sort of basic things. I wanted my independence. So then I moved, you know, I did a business and finance course and then moved straight down to London.
Did you have a master plan, or did things just kind of fall into place, or how?
I didn't have a master plan at all. And it's really interesting. So Jake, my son, who is 17 this month, so we have a lot of conversations about purpose and master plans and ambitions. And the main thing for me that I always say to him, even though it's his journey, so it's his lessons to learn. So I'm not, you know, it's not for me to give him all the answers. So because he has to go through the pains at times, because that's how we develop. But the one thing I say is that whatever you do, make sure it aligns and matches your purpose and your values, because you will always love what you do at that stage. And I think that was something that I had in me that I always did, but I didn't execute it in a plan. So it was only when I was 30, when I had Jake and I started my first business, that I kind of felt, oh my God, I know what I want to do. And so I'm quite proud of that. You know, I used my 20s to do various different roles, you know, within, as I said, sort of merchandising, marketing, sort of brand, all these things. And then it kind of fell into place. And I'm a true believer at times in plans, you know, are dangerous, because the danger is that you won't allow yourself to course correct, because what's right for you today might not be right for you in 10 years' time. So you can't be rigid. You have to be agile in what it is you want. And I think sometimes there's enormous pressure on the younger generation to know exactly what they want to do at the age of 16. And
or even younger.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I have a younger brother and sister who, you know, you can't help but kind of want to guide them a little bit through it. And, you know, what I've always, it's actually similarly to what I was saying, is that just go and try things. Like, don't put yourself into, you know, one thing right now, because it's your time to experiment, to really understand. I think it can be very dangerous to say you must do this thing. And I think when a person decides, like, this is what I want to do, then that's amazing, because then they're so focused. But as you said, it comes from their own purpose and their values.
Yeah.
But that is something which is even more important to kind of like, to find where you are going, what's the right course of action for you?
Yeah.
What's your path?
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah.
But I think also some people don't know what their purpose is and what they want to do, and they don't have a plan. Others absolutely do. So my niece, so she is, one sort of niece knows exactly what she wants to do, the other not so much, and that's okay. But it's sort of, but I do think for the younger generation there is that pressure in terms of, living their best life and all these things that you kind of, I feel that there's going to be a lot of pressure on that sort of Generation Z coming through to in terms of appearance. That's what I worry about the most.
When you say appearance, what do you mean?
In terms of the appearance of perfection.
Right.
The appearance of having the best job, the appearance of being, Instagram perfect. And that's my only kind of concern for the younger generation, that Generation Z. I've got to say, the young Generation Z coming through, I've got total faith. I think they're going to be an absolutely amazing generation.
I think they're the most educated.
Oh my God, completely.
Generation to ever exist so far.
Totally. They are so, they're very articulate. They're so socially aware. They're so environmentally aware. They have a real understanding of right and wrong. They're so principled. I have total admiration. I know that sometimes, I read that there's a lot of negativity around that sort of generation, but for me, I find them completely inspiring.
I think every generation has something against the other generation. It's like, but we did it this way and they're doing it a different way. And I think it's important to embrace whatever the differences are. We all benefit as a result.
Totally. And also there is that, if you track back and if you look at the generations before and how we brought those children, the sort of our kids up and how we were brought up, it naturally impacts how you then parent. And so it's that sort of observation. I find it, but then I find sort of social observation from a sort of a social perspective fascinating. How people behave, why they behave.
How do you think being a parent affected your business work and how you operate and how you see business?
So it definitely awoke my ambition from a financial perspective. So I certainly hadn't planned to have a child. It was something that, never really occurred to me in a strange way, even though, Jakey is the one thing that I'm the most proud of in everything that I've done. I woke up, one morning and I just thought, well, if I want to give Jake the life that I want him to have, I can't expect someone else to pay for it. So that's what kind of made me wake up to, to sort of driving and becoming ambitious and really sort of setting these sort of these aggressive personal goals.
Actually, talk to me about a time when you set up your first business and what inspired you and how did that come about?
Again, it was one of those things it wasn't pre-planned. It sort of fell into a place of timing. I was working at the Times Online. I was about to get married. I'd been at News International for 6 years. We were based in Wapping. Someone had just, had was shot with a pellet gun in the bum, and I just thought, you know what, they took their pound of sort of flesh and their litre of blood. But I did love News International. It was a really incredible experience. And then we got married. I tried being a sort of a stay-at-home wife. That lasted for about 2 weeks. And then I decided, okay, I want to open a fashion store. It kind of came up. There was a friend that I did it with. You know, I was sort of, some of my father was selling a business. I had sort of shares in the business, so I had the money, and, you know, and so timing wise, it all kind of, stars were aligned. And that's kind of where it started. And then, we incorporated the business on the 3rd of January, and I found out I was pregnant on something like the 2nd of Jan. And then, you know, we opened Powder on the 1st of August, and Jake was born on the 31st of August. And so that's kind of, so when I say there wasn't a plan, there's never been a plan in my life up until the moment that, you know, stuff got serious. And I was like, okay, I actually know what I'm good at. I found it. And I love it. And, you know, and I'm good at it. And that's where everything changed.
When did things get serious? What do you mean by that?
I guess because it was an adjustment of my priorities, you know. And I think the challenge that I had was when I had Jake, and I had opened Powder, so I was doing a buying season. I think I kind of really prioritized, and it's something that I do have that mother guilt complex over, but there were certain things that I prioritized over Jake from a business perspective. But the intention and the drive and the reason behind it was always as an umbrella cover for Jakey, you know, so that he could have the things that I wanted him to have, you know, and all these sorts of things, even though, you know, you can't actually, you know, purchase love and affection from your parents. So I think, you know, and then I think as a mum, you know, there's a natural process of having to manage all that emotion and guilt that I was holding on to. But stuff got serious when I realised how ambitious I secretly was. I was always very competitive. So I was a sprinter. I was a national sprinter and sort of won championships at county level and at national level. So I was always competitive. So I was competitive with friends, you know, stupid things, and competitive with, you know, in the really sort of really stupid things. But it was when I channeled my competitiveness to business and personal growth and success. That's when it got serious in a positive way.
And what's the most challenging thing that you've experienced in running your own business?
I think sometimes it's very lonely. Sometimes there's a sense of there can be a sense of fear of failure that stops you from doing something that probably you should be doing. I'm a true believer in, you know, you never give up, but actually sometimes you need to know when to give up. You need to know
It's hard to know.
It's hard to know, but it's even more painful if you don't do it at the right time. And so when things started to go wrong with wardrobe, you know, it was a very difficult time because it was at the same time going through a divorce with Andrew, who had started the business up together. We had new investors in, we had a new CEO. I was being kind of, I guess, shut out of key decisions because I didn't agree with the key decisions. So it was becoming a very toxic environment for me. But I was too stubborn to step away at that time. And so I was probably 6 months too long, you know, and that left me with much more, you know, the scars that I then had to try and recover from. But, you know, I've got to say, it made me a better person. So I'm kind of grateful. I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful for everything negative as much as everything positive that's ever happened in my life, because actually it's the negative things, if you take the lesson from it, that drives the personal growth. You know, if it's just always positive, hey, you're super lucky. But doesn't necessarily give you the wisdom that sometimes you need in business.
No, I think you're right in terms of saying that the negative is what really kind of makes you pay attention to what's going on, and helps you to kind of like reflect on yourself and, you know, what were the challenges and, you know, what to do about that. And it really sticks in your mind. And I think sometimes people can get very fixated on that, where it's not super helpful. But if you can, I suppose, accept the learnings and see what's, you know, what it was that was causing that, and to learn something from it, to be able to take it to the next level, the next challenge, and apply yourself in a different way. And we all make mistakes. We all have, you know, as you said, it's like if we only have positive experiences, it's actually very rare. You know, life throws all these curveballs at everyone. So it's impossible, and so it should, to avoid that.
Because you know, life is that path and that journey that you are supposed to be able to be strong enough at your core to navigate the hard and the good times.
Would you change anything looking back?
I would, but then if I did change things, I wouldn't be where I am today. The sort of probably the kind of person I am today. And so for that reason, no. And I'm a believer that actually, if you continue to make the mistakes, that's where it's a mistake. If you make a mistake and you learn from it, that's the lesson. So, and you know, because these things keep happening, you know, again and again, and it's those sort of, why is this always happening to me kind of statement that people come out with. As if, like, you know, the world is doing stuff to you. It's not.
It's trying to tell you something.
It's trying to, there's a lesson there. And the reason why it's continuously happening to you is because you're allowing it, and you're not taking the experience and taking the lesson, course correcting, and adjusting your path. So from that, for that reason, I would take every knockout I had, because it made me get back up.
What was the biggest lesson for you?
So the biggest lesson was when I left my wardrobe and I realized that I had built a personal identity of value and worth that was so intrinsically linked to my wardrobe that without my wardrobe, I didn't know who I was. And I think that's why I was so desperate to stay in, hence why I stayed for at least 6 months too long. What I learnt was that you have to remove emotional attachment to business, because it can only lead to poor decision making. It's so important to be passionate about your business, but you've got to be very careful when it comes to key decisions that you make, and the person you become. And so I became essentially almost two people. I was a work Sarah who was very aggressive, very driven. And then I was a personal Sarah who was hugely confused. And so but the lesson was that it needed to be something that rocked my core for me to make sure I looked. And it took me about 18 months to recover, if I'm honest, you know. And it was during that period of recovery that I then sort of gradually started, and it was really funny. So I went through the natural stages of grief, essentially. And it was towards the end when I just accepted what had happened, and I started to reflect, and I started to say to myself, well, you know, next time I will remove that sort of emotion from key decision makings, you know, within sort of the business decision makings. And I'm going to use, you know, I'm going to let data do, you know, lead the way. And then very quickly, you know, Shop Direct came along. And I remember saying, right, okay, all the lessons from wardrobe, I'm going to apply to Very Exclusive, which I did. And it was a much calmer ride, which actually, you know, it doesn't have to be frenetic. It doesn't have to be, you know, a crazy ride. Because actually, I don't think that's healthy.
I think for entrepreneurs, it's really difficult to separate yourself from a business that you particularly started. And I think for anyone who's really passionate, as you were saying, about what they're doing, these two things go hand in hand. And I always say that we're always trying to balance the opposite ends of everything. So from the passion that you know, that fuels your, you know, your drive and wanting to succeed and the competitiveness, to then taking, you know, stock of what's happening and seeing it in a different perspective that's maybe not your own, and you know, having to balance those things, which can be polar opposites. It can be really hard. But it's good to see that you can take the lessons and apply it to something where, you know, it's a continuation. It's taking the biggest lessons and applying it, and you know, and being able to change and being able to do things in a different way. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I do, you know, I believe that an entrepreneur, one of the most crucial things is to have that passion and that drive, because that is what keeps you motivated and pushing forward through the really sort of, you know, when you hit that wall, when you're sort of climbing the sort of, you know, the mountain from the challenge that you've set yourself. There comes a time where the founder actually, you know, needs to step aside and let a different approach drive the business forward. So you know, it's very much like phases of a baby's childhood, from baby to toddler to, you know, to teen, to late teen, to adulting. There comes a time when actually the baby is, in order for the baby to be a fully rounded, you know, balanced human being, that baby needs external influences from other people to help guide. If you keep your baby so close to you that you don't let anyone else make any decisions about what they do and where they go, you know, that child is gonna, you know, it's gonna have bigger issues down the line. And so I feel that that's very much the same.
What do you wish you knew when you started?
I wish I had remembered to look back and take the successes, because it was far easier to take the failures than it was to beat myself up about the failures, than it was to take the small wins, which were fun, and, you know,
celebrate the success.
Because there was but you know what retail's like. Retail doesn't stop. You know, it was originally, you know, every season was a new sort of mountain to climb. Now it's sort of every month is a new mountain to climb. So it's hugely intense as a sort of sector to be in. But yeah, I think probably I wish I had sort of, because I look back and a lot of things, you know, I kind of can't really sort of remember, because it was like sort of bombing down a motorway and, you know, going way too fast.
Yeah, it's like, what's next? What's the next thing? And moving on to it.
And also the problem with going that fast down the motorway, constantly foot to the ground, is that or foot to the, you know, floor, you sometimes miss your turn off. And that, you know, you end up paying for that.
Do you think it's inevitable that in the early part of the business you have to do that, or do you think you can go slower?
I think you can. Again, it's at different phases. It's about knowing when to do the sprint, and then I always used to say, you know, it's a sprint, not a marathon, but it's not. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's about making sure you know when you're supposed to sort of take the foot off the pedal.
How can you tell?
So I'm now a true believer in gut instinct is there for a reason if you listen to it, if you recognize it. And I think, you know, having guidance from either a mentor or a chairman or someone that you really respect that's maybe kind of not directly linked to you, I think these things are important.
Did you have a role model or someone that you looked up to that inspires you?
Do you know, I've been asked this question before and I kind of don't. A lot of people I find blends of things that I find fascinating and I'm really interested. But I'm not fixated on role models because I'm kind of
just set your own path.
Yeah, totally. I don't want or need to be influenced by someone else's journey to tell me what I can and can't do. So no, role models per se, not really. I've huge admiration for a lot of people, and that's different. But role models, not so much.
And obviously, you're a woman in business. Do you feel that impacted you in any way, positive or negative? What has been your experience?
You know, again, from my experience, I was fortunate that it hasn't impacted me, but that is not to say that I don't believe it impacts certain women, because I believe that to be the case. And so the only thing, as I'm fortunate enough, the only thing I can do to make sure as a leader is that I support, you know, the women coming through behind, but then just everyone actually, you know, people from backgrounds and areas where, you know, they were pigeonholed and they were told that they would never succeed, which is ultimately something that I was told at school, you know, because of my disruptive nature. And so that, from my perspective, is something that I'm hugely aware that I'm lucky enough that it hasn't impacted me. But also, I think at times we need to make sure that we support the young generation coming through. But sometimes if we feel that life is happening to us and we're not in control, sometimes things do happen to us. So I'm a true believer in mindset and, you know, passion and respect and, you know, these sorts of things, and fighting for what you want, knowing what you want and going after it.
And what has been your favourite role?
I've loved every single one. Okay. My favourite role was the role that I took between Shop Direct and this role, which was just being there for Jakey, because it was something that I hadn't done before. In, you know, as a, you know, really throwing myself in and being there and making sure, because, you know, Jakey was starting his GCSEs. He's going to hate that I say Jakey, but he was starting his GCSEs, and, you know, I wanted to make sure that we got through them and that he got the grades, and we did get through them. And, you know, he got what he needed, and it was great. And I just wanted to be there because I felt, you know, for too many times I probably wasn't there. So that I've loved. But then I've loved every single role because I've always, when I'm in it, I commit, I'm passionate, and I learn something. And I love what I'm doing now. I love it beyond. I'm so blessed. I'm, you know, which I know is really sort of cheesy, horrible sort of saying, probably overused. But you know, I feel very lucky, and I love it, and I love the challenge. So every role has been a disruptive role, which is what I love doing.
I think for me as a woman, we're having to combine so many different things, and the motherhood aspect, I think quite often we don't really talk about that.
No.
And that's a massive part of our identity. And, you know, we're talking about guilt and, you know, having to make certain priorities. And it's great to be able to see that you can come back to it and to reconnect. And it's not all about work and then all about family, but be able to, you know, to kind of like return to that.
Totally.
And see that as an opportunity to, you know, to reconnect with your family and to, you know, to bond.
And I do believe that sometimes women are extremely unfair to one another. There's a lot of judgmental focus, and I just, you know, and I just kind of, I don't like it. You know, I think that, and I think it comes from a place of competitiveness between ourselves. And if someone else is doing it and we're not, then we feel uncomfortable because maybe that's what we want to be doing. And, you know, so, and that I think is super sad.
I have to say, I don't know whether I've been super lucky myself, but I didn't feel that I had those negative experiences with women at all, actually. And throughout all of my career, I mean, especially in search, you tend to work a lot with women. And that has been a great experience for me. And I don't know, I think my generation as well has been quite good at doing that, or taking it, approaching it in a more conscious way of like, what, you know, what can we do to make it better and to support each other. And I feel like for me, that's, I don't know, maybe it's because it's something that I feel like is really important and actually what makes everyone better as a result.
I think it's a generational thing. I think it's a regional thing. So I live outside of London, and there can be particularly harsh. And there's this assumption that you know, you have to choose, you have to be one or the other. Well, you kind of don't. You know, you can be both. It's okay.
Well, looking into the future, I mean, you've just started your new role at TrueFit. What are you looking forward to the most there?
So, I mean, okay, talk about coming into a world where, you know, the use of technology and data is going to be fundamental now more than ever, because it's not just personalization, it's hyper personalization. And using data and insight to drive key decision making is even more so important in today's world. And I've seen some incredible data that shows consumer habits since March through to July. For me, the timing is, again, it's another one of those stars aligned moments. It couldn't have happened at a better time. You know, the deal was turned around in sort of 15 days of them approaching me. It's just so much to get after. I mean, TrueFit are known in the US. They've got some really, you know, amazing clients and sort of brands. And we've got a lot more to do in EMEA. We've got some amazing clients and brands that we're working with in the UK and other parts of Europe. But there's a lot more to go after, and that's what I love. I love the challenge. I love sort of, you know, getting the sort of the message out and talking about. It's not really just size and fit. It's the whole data platform that we work to, which is about supply chain efficiency, or sort of, you know, stronger customer insight, or, you know, helping to to sort of protect margin, and all these things are sort of no longer, you can't make those decisions with gut instinct because it's too complex. It's not the traditional sort of physical bricks and mortar, which was where you could use your creative aesthetic and your vision and all these things. Actually, now it's completely different because it's more global.
I think it's incredible. You're talking about kind of connecting the dots and not having a grand master plan, but always the timing. It's the timing, and the timing feels so right.
The timing on every single major gig I've had has been sort of spooky. You know, it has been and the thing is, I'm so impatient. So knowing that I've got to be patient is like one of the biggest sort of lessons, and knowing that and trusting in the process. And, you know, obviously sort of between you go for different sort of jobs, and you have conversations, and then, you know, you realize that you maybe don't get the gig, or and I learned that it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. And that was another thing. So I say that and my son's like, oh my God, yes, it's not rejection, it's redirection. It's so true. Yeah, so, you know, but it's hard when you've got to wait for the stars to be aligned, because particularly if you're, you know, ambitious and you want to get after it, it's, you know, you've got to wait.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in kind of managing your energy and how much focused you can be, how much clarity that you have. And so I think all of that makes a massive difference to yourself, like how you deal with issues. And
totally.
You know, you were talking about how, you know, you can remove the emotion from it. And I actually feel like it's taking the negative emotion out.
Totally.
Rather than just the, you know, emotion per se. Like when you feel good, you know, even when things don't go exactly as planned, or, you know, things happen that you didn't anticipate, it's just you bounce back easier. You see the positive way out of it. And I think that's
spot
just so
and
amazing.
I think that's so right. And you've sort of lasered into the nuance of the emotion, because the emotion can be as positive and negative. In equal balance. It can be what drives you, and it can equally be what crashes. And so it's the removing of that negative sort of attachment, because that's what drives wrong decisions, and, you know, and that sort of negative mindset, which you know, which can take you down a different path completely. I
really like the saying where it's like, where, you know, you're either running towards something or away from something. And this idea that you are kind of chasing your dreams rather than avoiding kind of failures or making things perfect. So do you have a mantra?
So I have a few things that I'm kind of, okay. So I have a few things. Where attention goes, energy flows. So that's to remind me about as much focusing on the positive, as well as reminding me to stop focusing on the negative. But also I have, so I just have very different, I have, dependent on where I am and which sort of ambition I'm, you know, or what my challenge is or my role, all my passwords are linked to success, linked to that. Because again, it's going back to that, where attention goes, energy flows. So it's kind of that immediate reminder of why I'm doing something, to sort of make sure that I kind of switch out of anything that I might be kind of questioning. Because you know, success or failure, it's all a mind play. Totally. Because it's whether, you know, the mind has so much power in terms of allowing us to run through the fear or stopping us there. And so, you know, that's why I just have, again, I went with the changes in my lifestyle. It was all to make sure that I learned more about myself. As a human, as a businesswoman, as a leader, and what I wanted to be as a mum. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, so yeah, I have a lot of sort of mantras, but yeah, where attention goes, energy flows is probably like one of my favorite.
And what does leadership mean to you?
So when I think of leadership in 2020, for me, it's about enlightened leadership. You know, I remember the the 90s of, you know, the boss. And the boss was a narcissist, and it was, you know, it was their way or the highway. And it's not, you know, the company's success is relying on everyone pulling in the same direction. And the reason why I'm grateful for my learnings and my challenges in life and my lessons is because it's so important that we can sort of share down on wisdom, but not to, again, tell them that that's what you must do, but it's about sharing, it's about giving guidance, and that's why, when I've been approached to be a mentor, and at times I say, look, my role as a mentor is not to give you the answers. It's not to do the job for you. It's to help you explain what certain outcomes might be. And from my experience, what I've experienced, but then equally it's your journey. So for me, leadership is about, I'm so passionate that people love what they do. I always say we spend so much of our life working that you have to love what you do, because otherwise, what a terrible waste. So I want my teams to feel motivated and empowered, and that I've got their back, and it's a safe space, and everyone knows what the strategy is or what the goal is, and and it's a sprint, but then it's a rest, and then because it's a longer, you can't sort of keep a sprint pace going.
It's like that saying, experience. It's like, learn to rest, not to quit.
Yeah, totally. But so I had so I was speaking with a gentleman who is the COO of a really famous digital fashion business. And so he was talking through his various experiences prior to the sort of current role, and that he, on sort of one of his first startups, he stopped and he did the most random passion role for 18 months because he needed to recover. He needed those wounds to heal. And I think when you're an entrepreneur, you know that feeling of having left with bite marks. And it's so important to let those wounds recover before you throw yourself into your next role, because that's when you get the clarity, that's when you get the wisdom, that's when you get the benefit of understanding why something happened.
Actually, I was talking to a CEO who's just left a very famous business, and she was saying that she is inundated with offers right now about what's she going to be doing next, because she was extremely high profile and she made a huge difference to the business. And she's like, no, I want to take this time. The best thing I've ever done is when I've, completely stopped and I was, just, with my family, doing the things that I love and just, really taking stock. And I'm really impressed that she has, decided to create those boundaries to be able to do that. So that's what kind of what you're saying. And I think that's a really powerful way of moving forward.
It is, but it's also, it's a brave step, because there is naturally, our sector moves at such a pace. There's that fear of, what if I'm not relevant anymore?
Yeah.
What if, the what if this, what if that scenarioing. So it's a really brave and it's a very hard decision to make, but it's so important, because it's so important that you regroup and, that you kind of reconnect with your inner, totally. And that's that's a leader versus a boss who is just kind of like, who equally, and there are many bosses where you prod and, you look in and you look under the bonnet and it's like, holy cow.
Scary.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining and for sharing your story and your lessons, and for, telling us about your kind of like your rebel days to kind of connecting the dots to, managing emotions and energy and the lessons that you've learned. And really appreciate knowing you so many years, and I hope there's many more. Thank you very much for being here.
And huge congrats to you, because you yourself have been on an incredible journey, and you're very inspirational. So
well, thank you.
Pleasure.